Thanks for staying with us, everyone. We begin from Tema, where members of the port committee have hit the streets to express their displeasure over issues including high shipping charges. They say shipping lines have turned deaf ears to their cry over the years and can no longer take it. Vice President of the Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders, Nana Esiamwa Pepra I, has been speaking to Joy Business.
The port issues are many, but today we are on the shipping lines. The issue with the shipping lines is their unfair charges and then some other unfair practices. We have been dealing with this issue for years, but today we're saying that enough is enough. The whole issue is about, like I said earlier on, their charges are way too high. And some of the things that they do add to cost of doing business at this port. And this is where we butter our bread. And then at the end of the day, all these costs comes back to the market. And then we all suffer for it. So we know that some of the things that causes high price of goods and services on the market, part is from the port. And if part is from the port and then the shipping lines are charging so high, definitely it affects everybody in Ghana. Series of documents has been written, several has been written to appropriate authorities, government, ministries, Minister of Trade, Minister of Transport. We have, paper written to them, telling them about these practices. They are aware. Nothing has been done about it all these years. But today, we want to tell the shipping lines that we are not sleeping. We want to make sure that Ghanaians have fair treatment, as is done everywhere in the world, as far as shipping is concerned.
Okay, so since we are not sleeping...
From today, after we're done with our demonstration, and then our concerns being, in fact, the signal being sent to the shipping lines, we will take it up to the next level. And then the next level will be, we go back to government again, and then let them know that we are not sleeping over the things that we have been talking about over these years.
All right, we can connect with Tema correspondent Kwame Yanka on phone. Kwame, has the protest ended? What was the outcome?
Okay, so Darl, after 2 hours of, let's say, protesting, these shipping agents, freight forwarders, and other related sister companies, if I should put it that way, having joined them to present their petitions to the various companies, including MSC, Intermodal, Grimaldi, among other shipping lines. They are giving them a few days to respond to their concerns. In the next week or two, if they are able to get if they are not able to get any favorable response, they will then take the next line of action. Now, mind you, these freight forward and other associations have been more or less going back and forth with successive governments, dialoguing and all that. But they believe, words have not been put into action. So they, on their part, would want to hit the street. They raise their placards, just call out governments and these shipping lines, which are not acting in favor of these associations, because they believe whatever costs they incur at the port will then be passed on to the ordinary consumer, then making the cost of items and prices imported into the country quite expensive, because Ghana is import dependent. So once these issues are not addressed, well, the consumer will continue to feel the heat week in, week out, as these shipping lines do not give a hoot about whatever is happening in the country. So they are giving these shipping lines and government, or to act, as it were. They are also saying that the likes of Ghana Shippers Authority, Ghana Maritime Authority, and others that tend to regulate the space and the shipping space would have to make, let's say, bold decisions, because they believe they are acting quite weak. They started the likes of neighboring countries, not too far from Ghana is Nigeria, but they are saying that just some months ago, there was a joint committee that went around West Africa, just assessing best practices that could be passed on to Ghana, or that could be copied here. But they realized that Nigeria, you can't just slap some charges, which is sent arbitrarily here for the ordinary consumer to suffer. So they're asking government to act now before it's too late.
Kwame, any response yet from the powers that be?
Okay, at the moment, not yet, but then some of the shipping agencies that these petitions were presented to have given the freight forwarders their word that they'll respond in due course and should, as it were, resolve the outstanding issues that the freight forwarders have raised.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tema correspondent Kwame Anka there. I appreciate the update. Now, Ghana continues to export more than what it imports since last year. That's according to the second quarter trade statistics released by the Ghana Statistical Service in Accra today. However, the report showed the value recorded from April to June this year declined marginally to 5.4 billion cedis. This also marks a substantial reversal in terms of what the country recorded in the first half of 2023. Professor Samuel Kobene-Nim is government statistician.
Service on trade activities for the second quarter of 2024 indicates Asia remains the largest contributor to the country's imports, contributing over half, and also the country's export.
In the second quarter 2024, the total trade value was 123 billion Ghana cedis, comprising 64.2 billion in exports and 58.8 billion in imports. Trade surplus has been recorded for the third consecutive time, although the value was more than halved from 11.5 billion Ghana cedis to 5.4 billion Ghana cedis between the first two quarters of 2024. The dominance of gold as the main export commodity has been further consolidated with an increase in its share of about 10.0 percentage points, specifically from 47.5% to 57.6% between the second quarter of 2023 and the second quarter of 2024. The export value of cocoa product decreased by 4.0 billion Ghana cedis between the second quarter of 2024 and the first quarter of 2024.
The report also indicates the United Arab Emirates surpasses Switzerland as Ghana's main gold destination for the second quarter.
From a percentage point of view, for the fifth consecutive quarter, we see a decline in the export value of cocoa beans with a current decline of 26.9% for the second quarter of 2024. We turn to export and import by continent. We continue to see the leading dominance of the Asian continent since the last quarter of 2024, when it surpassed the contribution from Europe. In the third quarter of 2023, Europe had a share of 37.7% relative to 32.1% for Asia. This was overturned in the last quarter of 2023, and this dominance of Asia has been recorded for both the first and second quarters of 2024.
Export value of cocoa products also decreased by 4 billion Ghana cedis from the first quarter to the second quarter of 2024. For Joy Business, James Ishen.
All right, you're watching The Marketplace. The IMF today begins formal engagements with government about how it fared under the fund program. The third review, Joy Business understands, will be heavy on some of the structural reforms that government has undertaken so far. Here's George Affe with more.
The visiting IMF team, which started arriving in Ghana over the weekend, are expected to open various rounds of meetings with government from today. The team is expected to be in Ghana for the next 2 weeks, with the engagement ending possibly on October 4, 2024. The Bank of Ghana will not be left out of this meeting, as there are some monetary issues that must be reviewed under this IMF program. However, prior to this visit, the IMF team from Washington, D.C., USA, had some virtual meetings with the central bank, so there's a likelihood that there'll be little engagement with the Bank of Ghana whilst the team is in town. We understand that the assessment will focus on 6 quantitative performance, 4 indicative targets, and 10 structural benchmarks. The fund will be reviewing all the economic and monetary data ending June this year. This will be the last assessment for the IMF program for 2024, as Ghana's program with the IMF is expected to end in April 2026.
Meanwhile, government says it remains optimistic of passing a third review. This will lead to the release of some $360 million by the IMF board in December this year. Now, government sources are basing their optimism on preliminary data ending June this year, which shows it has met all the critical targets and key indicators. Well, Professor Williams Reprai is Associate Professor of Finance at the Andrews University. He joins us on Zoom. Good afternoon to you. So we understand the IMF will be scrutinizing structural reforms undertaken by the government. What exactly would they be looking out for, do you think?
Good afternoon, Darl, and good afternoon to your viewers. So, if you remember, in the Ghana's PCPEC program, the document Ghana submitted to IMF, the structural benchmarks comprises how we're going to put together all the payables that are due by the MDAs, so that this will be fully known, and also how Ghana plans to rebuild the financial institutions, coming up with a buffer. An important element also looked at especially the energy sector recovery plan, and then also how government looked at negotiating and building the capital requirement for the banks, and some indexation for the livelihood program. So key for me, three main structural elements that they will be coming under review. And we already know that the energy sector has become a major issue, and I'm sure IMF will be looking at that. Remember, in the initial document that the government prepared under the PCPEC program, government said that they were going to remove subsidies, which they have not done that. The government was trying to come out with plans to reduce the transmission and distribution losses. And we know that this has not been achieved based on a letter issued by PURIC on behalf of ECG to the government, showing that ECG is almost collapsing. So this is very key. And then also when it comes to the banking sector, we know there are some banks already, some corporate governance issue, which the Bank of Ghana itself has not given approval for some of the banks to have board of directors being approved. And then some banks are also a little bit struggling with the capital adequacy requirement. So Bank of Ghana may have to come out with a way to meet all these things. So this also comes under the structural the structural benchmark that they have to be reviewed.
Okay.
In September, guidelines were given, but how it has been implemented is what they are going to look at. You know, from September to date, most of them has not been implemented.
How do you think the government has fared? You said most of them have not been implemented. The government is optimistic. They're going to meet the key targets and indicators.
So when it comes to the indicative targets, that is the international reserves, the balance of payments, the primary balance, all those quantitative figures, government is on course. But when it comes to the qualitative data, which is the structural benchmark or changes of the policy and other things, that is where government is lacking. So it's a mixed result for me, but knowing that, the most important thing is that quantitative will supersede the qualitative. Possibly IMF may grant that and then put in another timeline for government to meet in ensuring that these structural benchmarks are met.
All right, I want to switch topics, talk about the MPC meeting that begins today as well, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana meeting to review the economy, mainly looking forward to some policy rate cut of a sort. What do you anticipate will happen? What do you advise?
For me, we noticed that maintaining the policy rate at 29% have worked some magic to reducing the inflation rate, currently around 20.4% as at August. My best bet is that this rate must be cut between about 150 basis points to 50 basis points, noticing that inflation is dropping. Already, the cost of borrowing is high in terms of the treasury bill rate. So a cut in the monetary policy base rate will lead to also a reduction in the treasury bill rate and also the Ghana reference rate. And in general, if this is done, it's going to be an advantage of companies, because their cost of production or cost of funds will come down. And this is also going to be probably, if it's going to be in line with what has happened in the US, where we've seen the Fed also cutting their rate by 50 basis points.
Well, some anticipate that could also have an impact on the decision that the bank of Ghana's Monetary Policy Committee takes. Thank you so much, Professor Williams Prepare, Associate Professor of Finance at this university. I appreciate your time. You're watching The Marketplace. Time for the exchange. We put the spotlight on aviation. As you may have heard, Air France is expected to halt scheduled flights to Accra from October 25 this year. Analysts believe the low passenger numbers occasioned by their exit from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, 3 Sahelian countries currently under military rule, informed the decision. We want to bring in Sean Mendes, an aviation expert. Sean, hello to you. Before we talk about Air France, a bit of a scare at the Kotoka International Airport on Sunday after a passenger's luggage was detected to be emitting smoke at the baggage wrap area. Apparently, the passenger was traveling with batteries. Your thoughts about how that incident unfolded? There was an evacuation of a sort, and how it was handled, Sean?
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I think the one lesson that we need to learn from an incident such as that is, there's a constant thing when you do an online check-in or when you check in at the airport, you see the sign on the counter, which most people tend to ignore, which says, are you carrying these items in your luggage? And one of those most important items in that is batteries. And, there's a lot of other items which also can be dangerous to put in your checked luggage. Palm oil, for example. I see a lot of people from Ghana like to carry palm oil when they're traveling to Europe or North America because it's difficult to get there. So have a look at these things, those kind of things, batteries, bleach, acids, palm oil, some kinds of cosmetics, those kind of things, especially when they are tightly packed in a bag and when there is a pressurization or heating, these can catch fire very easily. And a fire in an airport, in an aircraft hold, can be very devastating. So we were actually very lucky that this was detected in the baggage area of the airport itself when that fire took place and not after it had been loaded on the plane. Because, in a plane traveling across the ocean or across the desert, a fire can really spread very quickly and could have been catastrophic. So I think the Ghana Airports Company did well to be able to detect this, to put the fire out, isolate it, and contain how things went. But I think it really is a lesson to passengers in terms of pay attention to those signs saying, do these things. Are you packing these in your bags? And if you are, declare it to the staff so they know how to properly pack it and, contain it without becoming a big problem.
All right, the palmer bit got me laughing. Let's talk about Air France. So we're hearing they're planning to suspend operations, on the Accra route beginning next month. What are you hearing from your end?
Well, definitely Air France is pulling out of it. And I think you outlined one of the reasons, which is that, the Accra flights were combined with their flights via Ouagadougou. And obviously with the, with France's troubled relations with Burkina Faso right now, those Ouagadougou flights are not continuing. So, in the meanwhile, a lot of the traffic from Accra was not just going to Paris, but these were passengers who were connecting onwards from Paris to North America, to Canada, to Europe, and so forth. Air France and KLM are owned by the same company, so that's the Air France KLM group. And at the same time, they also have a partnership with Delta Airlines, a joint venture for all passengers who fly on Delta, Air France, Virgin Atlantic, KLM across the Atlantic. Therefore, what the group is able to do is, by stopping Air France flights, they have instead increased Delta's flights. So Air France is pulling out, but the same day that Air France pulls out, Delta is coming in with additional flights. They're going up to a larger plane and daily frequencies to North America. So the reality is, while there won't be nonstop flights to Paris, there'll be more nonstop flights to New York from the same group of airlines. And KLM as well will be flying a larger plane this winter than they were last winter. So while there will still be 14 flights between Delta, KLM, and Air France, there'll actually be about 10% increase in seats. So certainly it's sad that the non-stop link to Paris will be gone, but overall there's still an increase in capacity from that group of airlines, the SkyTeam joint venture group, into Accra. And of course then Virgin Atlantic is also part of that group. And starting middle of next year, you're going to have daily flights from Virgin Atlantic as well. So I don't think it's a negative recognition of the Ghana market. I think they are actually increasing flights to Ghana because they see the potential in that market. It's just a case that because of the Ouagadougou issues, which were combined with the Accra flight, they've reallocated that capacity from Air France to the other airlines in the group.
Well, if you put it that way, there's not much to be worried about, right? The impact on travel along that route is not going to be significantly impacted.
No, and we've seen this in the post-COVID era. The growth of traffic from Ghana, especially into North America, has been very strong. So that's not something I would be worried about. I think these markets are growing at 7 to 10% a year, and I expect to see that continuing. So Ghana has been one of the strongest aviation markets to recover, despite the economic issues in Ghana generally. And I don't expect that to be a thing. I think you're seeing more and more airlines increasing capacity to Ghana rather than pulling out of the market. This is very much an anomaly, and it is being driven by forces other than the Ghanaian market and the Ghanaian economy itself.
Yeah, I just wanted to find out what opportunities this opens for other airlines now that Air France is not doing the Accra route.
Well, I think the main opportunities is going to be, with passengers who are going to be traveling from Ghana into Europe, because the vast majority of Air France passengers who are traveling to North America, those will move onto Delta pretty much seamlessly. I mean, if you were booked on Air France and your flight was canceled because, this is there, you have been rebooked immediately on a Delta non-stop flight to JFK and then connection from JFK. But into Europe, you've seen other airlines come in from Europe. For example, ITA Airways from Italy, they've started flights from Rome to Accra just in the last couple of months. And you've seen KLM as well increase the size of the aircraft they're flying. So you'll see opportunities for these airlines to potentially grab that European market share that Air France was taking. But you know what? I think the reality is that Air France was not a huge player in the Accra market. They were just flying 3 times a week anyway, compared to KLM daily, British Airways 10 times a week, and so forth. And Air France was also a shared flight, so it wasn't even that Accra was getting the full capacity of the aircraft. So I don't think they were a major player in the market, and I think the growth in the market will immediately lap up any market share that Air France had. So it's not a significant thing. It's a sad thing to see, of course, but the market has already adjusted and more than made up for the capacity that has left the market.
All right. Thanks so much for calming us down. Before you go, a travel tip for anybody who is thinking about traveling.
I think if you're thinking about traveling, the one thing we have learned from the issue at Kotoka International Airport is be careful of what you put in your bags, not just because of customs, but because of safety on board that aircraft as well. So keep an eye on what you're putting in there and make sure you're not putting corrosives or explosives or anything there by mistake.
Certainly not palm oil. Thank you, Sean Mendes, aviation expert. Enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah, and that's the exchange. That's it for the marketplace as well. More news on our website, myjournline.com/business. Ghana places 4th with largest growth in digital bank account in sub-Saharan Africa. Plenty more stories there, myjournline.com/business. My name is Darl. Thanks for watching. We will be back same time tomorrow.